When we talk about problems to solve in entrepreneurship, there are few problems better to solve than cancer. That's my next guest's mission. Padman Vamadevan is the co-founder and chief medical officer of Astron Health, a platform for personalised cancer treatments. They use molecular insights and advanced research to develop a unique algorithmic approach to give cancer patients more targeted treatment options. This tool, which is orders of magnitudes faster and lower cost than conventional methods of new drug development, helps cancer patients and care teams to not only get proactive, long-term cancer care, but to also extend remission and stay ahead of recurrence. Padman, congratulations. I want to give you a pat on the back straight away, like kudos for doing this. So obviously your background is in the medical field. What triggered you to explore entrepreneurship? And why did you think that this huge problem would be better solved as an entrepreneur versus a medical professional?
Well, look, firstly, thanks, Steph, for having me on. So great to be on. And hello to all your listeners. It's a great question to start off with. I think that from my side, what I realised in being a doctor, that we are incredibly good on the front line of solving problems that are non-complex. We're brilliant if someone's got a pneumonia, if someone's got a heart attack, if someone's got an urgent problem where there is a simple guideline and there is a formula that works. There is nothing better than the healthcare system globally, I think, for that. I think where I got to, my background is that I am a traditional doctor that sort of works at the nexus of oncology and something called clinical pharmacology, which is really understanding what drugs really do in the body. Okay, beyond just what they're licensed to do, can they do other things? And so working in a healthcare setting for about 16, 17 years, treating some patients successfully and not doing so well on other patients, what I really realised was that the current healthcare system isn't geared towards dealing with complexity. And that's not an intelligence problem. We've got some of the best minds, the best scientific minds in the world. We've got some of the best doctors, people that really care. The problem is really that they're not getting the right data. They're not getting the connectedness between their intelligence globally. Everyone's working in silos. And that doesn't enable us to deal with personalised care. Or deliver personalised care, I should say. What we end up doing is sticking to guidelines that are kind of for the many, not the few. And some of those guidelines will work and some of them won't work so much. And so that was really the problem that we were trying to solve at Astron, which is to say, look, in cancer, this is an incredibly complex disease. And there is a massive technological overhang. We can now tell you in incredible detail what is likely to have caused your cancer, how your cancer is behaving, what pathways is it using, what might happen next. But the problem is that the tools that we have to address that complexity are really, really limited. Drug development takes years and costs billions, and we deal with cancer at a sort of node level. We find a gene or a biomarker and we try to deal with that one at a time. And that's not really how cancer works. It evolves. The rest of the network doesn't really get hit. And the disease adapts really quickly. And so that's why at the moment, I don't think we treat it as well as we possibly could. And that's really why we built Astron, to try to fully understand what the triggers, what the drivers, what's enabling your particular disease to grow, to thrive, to behave in the way it is, what's going to enable it to thrive in the next 5 years, and try and get ahead of it by being just smart.
Incredible. Such a noble mission, Padman. I'm so impressed. If you're tuning into this right now, then first of all, a big heartfelt thank you. I really appreciate it. And secondly, there's a very high chance that you're on your own entrepreneurial journey right now. So whether you're a first-time founder and you're figuring things out and you feel like you're on your own, or if you've done it before and realized that actually this whole entrepreneurship business is a lot easier said than done, then I might be able to help you. If you feel like you vibe with my energy and feel like you need some of that professional big sister direction, support and advice, then I'm opening up a few select spots for that one-to-one coaching, mentorship and growth strategy for ambitious founders. There's a link in the show notes, so check it out and I would love to hear from you. All right, let's get back to the episode. What was the trigger for you to explore solving this problem through entrepreneurship? And why did this motivate you so much to explore another path in solving this?
I think because I realised, looking, I was on a path to becoming an academic clinician, probably within the NHS and with a university as well. And I realised when looking at, some eminent professors who were above me, really wonderful people, actually, and just having really honest conversations with them and talking to some at the end of their careers about what they felt they'd achieved. And when I talked to them, what they achieved was publications and, education, educating the next generation of doctors. And when I actually got really deep into it and said, look, how many patients did you actually, did your research translate into benefit for? Often the answer was very few. And I'm going to be honest, slightly controversially, I hope they're not listening here. But the main trigger for this, I think, was I was very happy working as a clinician. I loved it. I love seeing patients. It's one of the things I really miss now. But actually, I went for dinner not too far from here with two of my very good friends from university, from my time at Cambridge, and both economists. One works very high up in the kind of food and marketing sector, and one is a CEO of an IPO'd company in the UK. And I spent an hour listening to them talking about everything that they'd achieved. And after that, they looked at me and they were asking me about what I was doing and the change I was making. And we had published a paper recently showing that we had sort of doubled survival in a particular type of brain cancer. And that paper was in about 96 patients. And I expected them to sort of be really wowed and dumbstruck at this. And the question they looked at me and they said, well, has that changed any guidelines? And I said, well, no, we would need to run a trial and that's going to take billions and decades and it might not ever be possible. And they said, okay, and how many patients do you see every week? So, 30, 40, 50, whatever it was. And they said, well, look, Pad, that's great. But how is that scalable? Like, you're one person, you're a smart person, there are lots of smart people. How do you scale that into population level change? Because clearly you've got something, but how do we move the needle for people around the world? And I was really annoyed. I was sitting there thinking, come on, look, I'm trying to deal with cancer patients here. And you guys are like, you're building food empires and selling cards and whatever else it is. Absolutely brilliant guys. And I didn't speak to either of them for a few months afterwards. But it was the shift I needed in a mindset. And I actually went back and spoke to my wife about it, who's a physio in the NHS as well. And she thought it was hilarious. And she was like, I think they're smarter than you give them credit for here, Pat. And what ended up happening was that was one of my triggers to join Oneday, which obviously you know well. And it was the movement to say, okay, well, look, I don't feel that I can achieve or we can achieve the change, the systemic change in the system that we need to in terms of building, a framework that's going to help people at a population level scale. The NHS isn't built to do that. It's built to help one patient at a time, do an amazing job. It's got fantastic people in it. But to build systemic change, I firmly believe that you need companies that are geared just to doing that, to collecting the data, to being completely focused, radically focused on just that aim, to getting the right data, connecting the right team together, connecting those silos together, working with the NHS, working with all those people, but with one singular goal.
Hey gang, super quick interruption, but I promise it's worth it. I want to tell you really quickly about Oneday. It's an 18-month MBA program, but get this, you literally start and scale your business for real alongside it. I am a mentor on the program. If you've been following this show for a while, then you may have picked up on the fact that I work there as well. That's one of my other jobs, and I absolutely love it. I've been with the business now for 2 years, probably a little bit more by the time you're listening to this, and that's why I can say with utmost conviction, from being on the inside track, how good this program is. So you've got the curriculum, the content, the learnings, the resources, the frameworks that add the structure to the chaos and the mess and give you that much needed direction on how you can move the needle week on week on week and get closer to your entrepreneurial goals. Beyond the actual content and curriculum, you've got one-to-one mentorship. So with myself, for example, and then best of all, I would argue the community. You get access to other entrepreneurs that are on the same journey that you are, because entrepreneurship is tough. And so being surrounded by other people that are on the same journey, who can pick you up when you're down, and can also be helpful in terms of sharing other learnings, these resources. Honestly, I cannot talk any more highly about this program. I'm going to drop the link in the show notes. Check it out if you're a first-time founder, if you're considering making that leap into entrepreneurship, or maybe if you tried something before and it didn't quite work out, or you realized actually this whole entrepreneurship game is a lot harder than you expected. Oneday is the place for you. The frameworks, the guidance, the support, both practically, emotionally, is just second to none. So check it out. Let me know what you think. Now let's get back into the episode. You've got to be playing a completely different game, haven't you? Like, one of the foundational ingredients for any type of success, which I talk about, is first and foremost is play games you can win. Select the game that you want to be playing first. Yeah. And so you recognize the advantage that you've had is like being on the inside. You've got that knowledge, you've got that first-hand experience, you've observed everything that's happening. You've come to that realization that, okay, we're not going to solve this problem in this way or in this timeline through this existing systemic structure. And there's a reason for that. And we get that. So we're not bashing how that works. Really interesting about that dinner. And I love hearing about those specific trigger moments. It's really funny how that bruised your ego as well. I'd be the same. I need a few months to like lick the wounds and then come back again. But that was exactly the sort of thing that was crossing my mind as I was listening to the early part of your story, right? Like, I was wondering, like, were your parents entrepreneurs? What was that sort of exposure that you had? Because you mentioned that, okay, maybe they're smarter than you. I doubt that. But it's more the fact that these two friends of yours, they just come from a completely different world, right? Yeah. They're in the private sector. They're both economists, as you said. It's much more commercial, capital. It's like that completely different viewpoint. And that's where it's really healthy. When we talk about diversity, it's not just the colour of our skin or our genitalia. It's that diversity of thinking as well.
Absolutely.
So your next step, so you kind of came to this realisation. I can imagine in terms of like your self-identity, you've had many, many years as a medical practitioner. It must have been such a shift for you to move into being an entrepreneur. Yeah. I think even like now, would you call yourself an entrepreneur?
No, I actually call myself still a medic, but I'm just practicing medicine in a slightly different way, is the way I think about it. And it's interesting. My background is that both my parents are doctors. My mum is a psychiatrist, my father an ENT surgeon back in Sri Lanka, but when he moved here became a GP, a family doctor. And when I said that my wife said that they were smarter, what she actually meant, they are smarter, but what she actually meant was that they had an ulterior motive. And actually it's quite funny because after Astron was set up, and we started doing what we were doing, I went and spoke to one, and he said to me, he had a twinkle in his eye. He said,
"They were best.
It worked." No, not quite that, but it did work then, didn't it, Pad? Because it's taken you 5 years to kind of take the hint that you could be building something here, and we just thought now's the time to be harsh.
Give you that push.
Yeah. So it was actually they'd actually curated a plan, I think, beforehand without reading it between the lines. So I kind of owe their, what can I say, their sort of robust fronting up to a really good mate. But it worked. So
fantastic.
Thanks, Des.
So those first steps. So first of all, you've got that kind of like, okay, having these outside perspectives and opening your mind to these other ways of solving this problem.
Yeah.
What are those first steps that you take on that path to entrepreneurship? You mentioned Oneday. So as context to our listeners, Oneday is an edtech scale-up. It is an MBA program built by founders for founders. I'm a mentor on the program, very proud to be one. And the best thing about it is that fully academically certified, you get an MBA at the end of it, but the best thing is that you start and scale a business for real alongside it. So that's how Padman and I are connected. He went through the program. I was very, very impressed with his final capstone assessment. So that's just a bit of context for the listeners. Was that the first step for you into entrepreneurship? And if so, why did you choose Oneday?
Yeah, it's again a great question. I think it took a lot. I think when you're comfortable in a profession that you love and you can rationalize everything that you do every day by the fact that I took an immense amount of just pride in helping patients. They all have my mobile number. I spent as much time, in the evenings on the phone to people, reassuring them, talking them through things as I did in clinic doing that. So it's just kind of one of the professional duties is the wrong word, but responsibilities that I took on. I, as I said, I really missed that. But I think for me, I've always been someone who has had lots of ideas across loads of different things, actually. And the difficulty was always knowing how to translate those. And I'm always someone that tries to build the perfect product before standing it up or letting anyone else see it. And actually, one of the first things that I learned, the reason I chose Oneday really was it was about building a product, not just learning the theory. Because I thought, I'm great at exams. I can learn the theory and I can pass that, and I'll have another, MBA, and then I'll go on for another 10 years doing exactly what I'm doing now,
collecting certificates.
Exactly. I was like, this is the safe thing to do.
Yeah.
But it's not the right thing to do. And it was actually my dad that said to me, look, take the risks that I never did. He was a GP and loved it.
That's so great.
But I think he looks back on his career now and thinks he wished he'd done other things with his time, as well as being a doctor. And that's what attracted me to Wonder. I think it wasn't really about the MBA, the certification, although that's obviously nice. It was really about the exposure to people who had been there, done it. Really simple things. I was fantastic at being able to tell my stories, you can probably hear, in 1,000 words, in a really complex way where everyone would fall asleep by the time I got halfway. And one of the first things I got from Oneday was that you have to simplify things. And if you can't tell your story to everyone and they aren't interested within the first 3 sentences, you've lost them. And that was it. The other thing that was a really early learning, actually, and I think one of the things that I have really taken to heart, and it's changed me most in just my personal life and my interactions with people, is all about that perfection goal. And I think it was Ben, who's now my CEO, who was my mentor at Oneday, who came up with I didn't come up with it, but he told us about the whole Boy's law of iteration, where speed of iteration beats quality of iteration every single time. And I don't know if you know the kind of story behind that.
Sure.
I'm sure. Oh, okay. It's a cool story, actually. It's stuck in my mind where there was essentially 2 particular type of fighter jets, so MiG-16s and F-86s, I think they were. And essentially, the MiGs were better than the F-86s in every single way. They were more maneuverable, they were faster, they climbed faster and higher, more quickly, they were built better, etc. And the F-86 were older. They had 2 advantages, and that was it. They had, I think, side windows, so you had slightly better visibility from the side, and they had hydraulic, controls, and that was it. And every single person in this field predicted that in a dogfight, the MiGs would win every single time. And actually, what happened was that the F-86s won, I think, 9 out of 10 times. And it was super interesting because Boyd went back and looked at it, and he said, well, look, the MiGs are higher in quality in almost every single metric, but the F-86 win. So why is that? And it turned out that he thought that actually maybe it's the speed of iteration, and the speed of iteration being that hydraulic control that the F-86 has had meant that the pilots, even though, the F-86s couldn't climb as fast or weren't as easy to turn or whatever, the actual control to turn them was a lot easier for the pilots to use. Mm-hmm. It required less muscle, or less time, and so they were able to just move much more easily. Mm-hmm. And so over time, in a dogfight, when you have to do that same movement loads of times, you could iterate really, really quickly because the lever was easier to turn than the kind of manual one. And that's why they won the dogfight every single time. And that's kind of where that learning comes from. So from my point of view, in medicine, you get rewarded for staying within guidelines and not making mistakes.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's really hard.
The opposite.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So in entrepreneurship, you get rewarded for making mistakes quickly enough so that you've still got some runway left.
Completely different world, isn't it? And again, with safety and putting patient first, it's just the complete opposite. Rightly and very understandably so, right? You can't take risks, move fast and break things, all of these startup truisms. So you shared the Boyd's Law as a story that really stuck with you, that helped to kind of better sort of, I guess, appreciate the importance of the speed of iteration. Was there anything else for you that helped that sort of mindset shift? Because you've been living, eating, breathing this whole other world for many, many years. And so I understand that it's not as easy to be, okay, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to just learn how to work in this completely different way. So was there anything else that I guess helped you overcome that sense of perfectionism, dotting the I's, crossing the T's?
I think it was that there's so many cases in medicine where I thought I'd done everything right. And I didn't achieve the outcome that I wanted. for the patient that was sat in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting there thinking, I've done everything. I've done every test. I've read every book and paper. There was nothing within the confines of the system that I could have done differently. And yet this person in front of me hasn't had, the report, the results that I would have thought. And yet there's someone else over there who's done all the things that maybe they shouldn't have done, and they've done really well.
And they've succeeded.
And I can't explain it. And I think that's why I think the problem that we're trying to solve really, fundamentally, and this might be a bit controversial, I see this all over my timeline, that AI is going to cure cancer. And the thing is, from my side, it might well help. And I hate using that word cure, but it might help turn cancer into a chronic disease, which is what we're trying to do really, into something that is manageable long term. Mm-hmm. But the main problem is that it's a data problem, not an intelligence one. We aren't collecting the right data. We're not collecting enough data. We're not collecting broad enough data. We're not collecting it frequently enough, and we're not sharing it with the world. And I'm not, our team is wonderful, but we haven't got all the answers. We haven't got all of the expertise. And so one of the things that we are really focused on is we've got a use case scenario for collecting broad, deep molecular data across cancer types. But we want to make that accessible so that other people who are asking slightly different questions can interrogate it and use it and move this forward.
Yeah.
And it's a public health, decision there.
Yeah. You mentioned the buzziest word of 2025, obviously AI. How much of AI are you incorporating into Astron?
A fair bit. And I think where we are with Astron at the moment, so essentially what we are is a bioinformatics platform. So the way I think about cancer management at the moment is that we talk about precision or personalized medicine. But the main problem, as I mentioned, there's a big technological overhang. So we know that there are over 750 different cancer driver genes, at the sort of DNA level. And that's one level at which you can look at cancer. There are many other levels. You can look at how those genes are expressed, or what proteins they're creating, or what the metabolism of the person is, or, the immune system, etc. So just looking at DNA is one bit. But there are 750 potential cancer driver genes. And at the moment, precision oncology can only hit about 50 of them. And in any one cancer type, we're looking at kind of 2 or 3 drugs hitting 2 or 3 genes, and that's it. So precision oncology is for the few, not the many at the moment. And the problem that we are trying to solve is that drug development is absolutely vital. Don't get me wrong. It's the cornerstone of the next frontiers in oncology. But drug development is costly. We're talking $2 to $4 billion to create a new drug or vaccine, and it's also really time consuming. It takes 10 to 12 to 15 years to develop a new drug, and there's a lot of risk for a drug company. You're finding now, because the costs are so high, the cost of developing a new drug double every 9 years or so. It's ridiculous. Only drug companies can afford to do it, really. Universities can't, charities can't. It's really hard.
Can I just say on this point on cost, what you make come up in my mind for me is the extortionate, unbelievable, eye-watering amount of investment that is going into AI, to bring that back up again, into like the technological development, the servers, all of everything in this whole kind of AI industry is so like incomprehensible, the scale of it. How does that make you? Because it's like, you can, like anything in like you can find the solution, you can find the money. If there's like enough of like a capitalist need, enough of like a political,
Look, I think fundamentally we're in a system where we're trying to create one drug for one alteration, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
Because you're dealing with one node of a really complex disease.
Yeah.
You deal with one node, and if you're lucky, it works for a while, and then the disease evolves anyway.
Yeah.
But the problem is, if you're thinking about a drug company and they've identified that there is already a drug out there for a particular molecular alteration, and that drug works really well, and it's worth, I don't know, $50,000 per month to the drug company per patient. That's an incredibly, rewarding target to hit. And they think, well, there's a drug out there that works, and that company's doing really well. How about I hit the same target, but I use a drug that doesn't have to be injected? It's a tablet, or it's got better side effect profile, or whatever it might be.
Just like optimizations and improvements on something that already works.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's hugely de-risking it. So when we're talking about hitting more targets, that's not how drug companies are incentivized. They're incentivized to hit targets that they know are going to work.
Yeah.
And so our approach at Astron is we can't solve that problem with new drug development. That's absolutely vital. It will continue apace. And the AI bit that you mentioned, actually in drug development, the hard bit is even if you expedite the bit at the start where AI is really useful, identifying better biomarkers, etc., that's just the kind of first 20% of the process. You still have to go through phase 1, 2, 3 clinical trials. And that takes time because you're looking at outcomes and safety and all that kind of thing. So we're still talking about an 8-10 year process ultimately. So from our point of view, where we use AI is we say, okay, well, look, there are hundreds of thousands of papers out there that talk about drugs, oncology drugs, non-oncology drugs, supplements, lifestyle interventions, anything that can have an effect in your body. And there are papers in the peer-reviewed literature that talk about how those interventions affect different pathways, proteins, DNA. And what we're doing at Astron really is we've created an engine which is LLM, I suppose, which is incredibly effective and specific at drawing out interactions between an intervention and a target. We then score that intervention using our expertise on multiple different criteria. So how good is the literature? What kind of studies were there? Who published it? How many patients were there? Were they just in animals? Were they in cell lines, etc.? How good's the actual binding data? So how well does that drug actually bind that target in real life? How safe is the intervention? Is it relevant to your particular cancer?
Amazing.
How important is the gene? And all of that is really important because patients often ask me, how is this different from like Gemini or GPT? And the thing is, we're not just trying to find any pattern because you can literally go to GPT or Gemini and put in any drug or any supplement and any disease, and it will find you a way that they're connected and it might be, useful. That's not science. That's not useful at all. That's just finding trends that might be completely wrong.
Yeah.
And the thing with patients, and this is the hard bit, is that they explore this journey once. They do it once. It's really difficult for them to be experts because you're kind of constantly learning from what's going wrong or right, but they have one chance to get it right.
Yeah. Is there a more personal driver for you with this?
The surprising answer is actually not, which is, I think for me, I like challenges, and cancer has a really special place from a psychological viewpoint. You think of someone with a diagnosis of cancer and you compare them with someone with a diagnosis of, heart failure or dementia or diabetes even, and people think the worst about cancer. And the reality is that there are lots of cancers that people do really well from and live long, healthy lives. But I think for me, I actually trained initially in cardiovascular medicine, and we became really good at treating heart attacks and strokes. And that was kind of like the reason that I thought, okay, well, they've achieved a lot there. What they did in cardiovascular disease kind of mirrors what we're trying to do in cancer, which is if someone has a heart attack, the acute problem is you've got a blockage in a blood vessel and you need to put a stent in or a bypass and restore the blood flow. And that's great. And that really helped. But actually, most of the research dollars that were spent in cardiovascular medicine was on the secondary prevention. Like, how do you prevent that person from having another heart attack or a stroke? Well, you identify the risk factors. Have they got high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes? Do they smoke? Are they taking cocaine at the weekends? They're not doing enough exercise, whatever it might be. And you really aggressively optimize that. And you measure, what you're doing and what impact that's making. And failure for a cardiologist is that person ever having a heart attack or a stroke again. Okay. And in cancer, what we do is typically most of the tools, and there are some newer tools which do different things, in the case of, say, immunotherapy, but typically or historically, most of the tools in cancer, surgery, radiotherapy, and chemotherapy, are designed to kill cancer cells. Okay, so eliminate as many cancer cells as you like, and then hope it doesn't come back, right? We're not really hitting those secondary prevention factors that affect how likely it is to come back. And that's where I thought there was a real job to be done. And obviously, cancer is much more heterogeneous, much more complex. We're not talking about 5 or 6 risk factors. We're talking about, 750 to the power of 3 or 4, right? So the combinations are infinite.
Wow.
Which is why the toolkit has to be massive. We're not just talking about 5 or 6 different drug types. We're talking about potentially thousands.
Wow.
And that's why conventional drug development can't solve this problem. And so the first bit is collecting the right data on the right patients at the right time. The second bit is being really practical with how we hit this. But for me, I think I just established that I wanted to, big challenges are what I feel like I'm here for,
Love
if I'm
that,
completely honest.
I'm very happy
I
to hear that.
I thought that cancer was, although I wasn't directly affected by it, actually for me, that means that I can slightly depersonalize it. And don't get me wrong.
This is exactly what I was about to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, carry on.
No, please.
No, I was just thinking exactly that, with your opening answer on like it might be surprising. Like, actually, it's not surprising to me. And I was just thinking that. I was like, it enables you to be perhaps more level-headed, like less emotionally affected, and just eyes on the prize, like focused on the problem you're solving, leveraging your experience, your expertise, the kind of technological age that we're in as well, and how you can apply AI and data to just solving the problem. So almost more effective in that sense.
Yeah, I think it makes it certainly helps with that. It also takes the ego out of the game.
Yeah.
When you haven't got and don't get me wrong, every patient is a horse in the race for me, and I want to do everything.
Yeah, of course.
Today,
yeah.
Absolutely, as long as it's safe and proportionate, etc. But it does actually mean that I don't have a particular philosophy that I'm here to develop.
Yeah, exactly.
We're trying to kind of find the truth for every patient.
Exactly.
And then deal with that truth in the best possible way, or give their doctors the best information to deliver the interventions in the right way for that person's version of the truth. And that, I think, is actually a bit of a superpower.
Exactly.
And it also kind of leads into the decisions we've made around who's in the team and how we're growing as a company.
Amazing. Well, you've had it on a platter. The perfect segue, because the other thing I wanted to ask you about is you mentioned that your mentor on the One Day program, which we touched on, is now your CEO.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear about that. Like, what was the decision-making process with that? How did it feel bringing in an external person to come in as a CEO to run the business that you founded?
Do you know what? It was the easiest hard decision I think I've ever made. Really, 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 really easy. Ben is, like yourself, Steph, just an incredibly humble chap. He is.
I am a humble chap.
Sorry, my apologies.
I love it. I've got the masculine energy.
No, not at all. He is. Yeah, he's obviously, as you know, an incredibly successful entrepreneur. He has the scars, the things that have gone really right, the things that have gone really wrong. And if I'm honest, I think one of the things that One Day taught me was to really double down on the things that I'm good at already.
Amazing.
And to be quite frank, I haven't got the time, not me personally, but patience and science hasn't got the time for me to learn how to be a good CEO.
Love that.
I'm, a middle-aged man. I've been a doctor for a long time. I've been a scientist for a long time. My expertise lies there. That's what I think I can deliver for patients. That's what I want to deliver.
Do you know what I'm just observing? I'm so sorry, but the lovely compliment that I will take about being a humble chap and
My apologies to everyone.
No, I love it. That what's really funny is like that humility that you recognise in Ben is something that you just have in buckets, Padman. And this comes out here as well, even with this decision to bring in a CEO. Like we mentioned before about not having any ego in the game whatsoever. Like there is the ego has like left the building with you, right? And I really wish, everyone could do with having, greater self-awareness, but especially founders, especially entrepreneurs, where I get how difficult it is when like it feels like it's your baby, it's your mission, you're so dedicated to it, you've got that conviction, you've got the vision. I totally get that. But sometimes when you're able to put some of that ego aside and really truthfully, objectively ask yourself, I think with you here again, with the huge problem that you're solving, I think you're already incredibly humble and knowledgeable and lovely and super high self-awareness anyway. But when you combine that with this life or death problem that you guys are solving, it just means that ego is now in a whole other postcode. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And so obviously not everyone is solving these life and death issues, but you'd be so much better for it, because to your point is like, I just know so many people who are doing it for their own egos, to prove it to either themselves or somebody else. But there may be like this other battle-tested CEO that might be better at leading the company and taking it to that next direction. I think especially when you're past maybe a certain level with the business as well. I see that sometimes too when like you're post-product market fit and you're on that scale-up journey. Being a founder, a 0 to 1 leader is very different to like a 1 to 10. So I really commend you for that, Padman.
Well, do you know what? I think part of it is actually being a doctor, because it's really difficult. people might disagree with me here, but on the inside, when they're really honest with themselves, most doctors have quite a lot of self-awareness and not that much ego. Maybe on the outside there's a lot of bluster because there's this paternalistic view of doctor knows best, and they have to kind of portray that image. But in the individual moments where you're there at the end of the day, and every doctor does think about what's happened that day, it has a funny way of smacking you in the face just when you think you know, it's a commitment to lifelong learning, and it, you know, there is, your ego gets bashed every single day when
you humble.
It does, absolutely.
Danny, I'm so sorry to jump in here again, but like on the earlier conversation around how completely different these worlds are, actually this is something that it does have in common with the world of entrepreneurship, right? Like we kept getting like knocked back down, keeps us humble.
Absolutely. And to your point about, you know, bringing Ben in and that being humble, I think there was a bit of selfishness in there, if I'm honest, because ultimately my skill set, maybe I could be good at being a CEO, managing a team and growing the business and fundraising and all that. And I love doing all of that. Of course I do. But I'm not as good as Ben is, and I'll never be as good as him because he's been doing it for 20 years, to be quite frank with you. And that is his skill set. And I'd like to think that probably he would say the same about me scientifically. But I, you know, I think from my point of view, I think being a founder is not about being a hero. It's about bringing in a team of people that resonate with your core mission and have the same values as you do for your business, so that you don't need heroes, ultimately.
100%.
And look, in terms of, there's a lot of founders who have run their own companies and done incredibly well, so don't get me wrong, that can happen. But for me, I always felt this was too important a project for it not to work because of the wrong CEO. And I thought, you know, look, if you're the founder of your business, maybe you haven't dreamt big enough. And I think all of us in our team are humble. We're all searching for the truth. We're all searching for the right way of doing things, so that, you know, we're being really practical. We're driving change, but we're not doing it in a really difficult to tolerate way for the establishment, you know. And that's part of it as well, just being smart about how you approach conventional science and conventional oncology to be part of the solution, not to be a thorn in the side.
Renegade,
exactly,
like fully like disrupting. You've got to play the game as well, right? It's important for anyone to bring in a CEO, but especially again solving this problem. Other than Ben's experience, track record, like being a battle-tested CEO, was there anything else for you that made you confident that Ben would be the right CEO for your business?
So he's got some really complementary skills. So he's been working on neural networks since he was about 12, I think. He is also one of the best stories. If anyone has a chance to sit down with Ben Waitley, he's one of the best storytellers ever. We were actually at a team Christmas drinks a couple of days ago, and we just sat there listening to him. He's incredible. But he's a fantastically intelligent guy. He is a wonderful communicator, and he gets people really rooting for him. I think those are his superpowers, to be quite frank. He also is incredibly good at bringing everyone into the conversation. So in terms of, you know, our core values, he's really collaborative. No decision gets made just by him or just by the senior leadership team. Everyone's involved, and we are a small team because we're a software team and an R&D team. But he just really manifests everything that I wanted for Astron.
Incredible.
Ultimately.
I love it when you know, right? That's
Absolutely.
incredible. I love that. You mentioned fundraising earlier as well. Like this was one of the benefits of bringing in another CEO who's kind of been around the block. They've been there, they've done that, they've got the t-shirt. So on that note, congratulations on raising 700k in your fundraising. That's incredible. What were your lessons learned from that? I know fundraising is always a top topic for entrepreneurial listeners. Everyone wants to know, like, how do they bag the loot? So any top lessons you can share from that fundraising?
Yeah, I think this was a really interesting one. Is that I often concentrated on the science and how exciting it was.
Yeah.
And what I realised was that a lot of investors are really busy. They're super smart. And if you gave them long enough, they would absolutely understand the core and the essence of our science and be super excited by it in the same way, but they just didn't have the time. Mm-hmm. And what they really wanted was the inevitability of our solution working. And that's really difficult to give them, of course, especially as a doctor and as a scientist. And you could never be sure about these things. And there's always risk, of course.
You can't blag it.
No, of course you can't. But I think that was the thing. There was, you know, they were buying in. I think firstly, we were super lucky that the funding groups that we have eventually worked with were people who had identified and cared about the same problems that we cared about. We weren't trying to show them what the problem was. And this is one of the benefits of working in science and cancer in particular. As you mentioned earlier, everyone's got a relative or a friend or someone that's been through that. And it really resonates with people psychologically. And I think that's been helpful for us. I think a lot of people now in our generation, sorry, Steph, I know you're not younger than me, but
I've got a baby face, don't worry.
in my generation, I suppose, we're getting cancer younger, and talking about 5-year survivals isn't enough, right? We need to be talking about 35-year survivals and getting this to be a chronic disease. And I think what our mission is all about, not just talking about cure, but giving people great quality of life for as close to normal length of time as possible, without making it this horrible noose around your neck. That's what we're about, and I think a lot of people resonate with that. So I think those are my two main points.
How do you go about finding them? I guess, did you just kind of really lean into Ben and his networks and his contacts, or any other practical tips?
Yeah, there was quite a bit of that. That was the other thing I didn't mention. Ben seems to know everyone.
That's helpful.
It really is helpful. So there was a fair bit of that. But then going to health tech conferences, meeting people, honing your elevator pitch, really telling them what you're trying to achieve. And actually, what's really exciting is that one of the things about Astron is that yes, we think an amazing solution for how to deal with personalizing cancer and doing that at scale really rapidly without having to wait 30 years for the next batch of new drugs to come about. But also we're building this incredible database, which is really, if I'm honest, like a public health service.
So much value in and of itself, right, with the database.
Exactly. And I think that brings a huge amount of interest to lots of people that you wouldn't associate. Pharmaceutical companies have been really interested in what we're doing. Biotechs, healthcare systems, etc. Because the kind of joining up of that data is a massive issue.
And what I'm taking away from this as well is it's really easy to overlook the magical convalescence of these various factors that are both inside and outside of your control. So the fact that the selection of the problem to solve, which has obviously been drilled into you through the Oneday program, right? We spend a lot of time, what we call running into the spike, and really sort of we're actually kind of proving you wrong at every step, right? We want to actually pull it apart, rip it apart, see if there's any holes in it. And so that's where first and foremost it's absolutely vital to choose the right approach. It's kind of what I said right at the very beginning. It's play games you can win. Absolutely. We all get we get these ideas, like you said, you're very much an ideas person. We can all imagine what this thing would look like, and even the branding, the website, all this other stuff. But we leapfrog too far all the time. You need to spend time in that discomfort of choosing the right problem, because now where we're at in your story is that fundraising and how much that has helped kind of those tailwinds of, it's a huge factor, right? It's a huge problem that you're solving. So many people relate to that. And then on top of that, you've got kind of the tailwinds with AI at the moment. I feel like every single VC is just AI. That's at the buzz at the moment. You've got Ben that you've brought in as your CEO. You've got all of these various factors, your expertise, of course, that again, a lot of that has been inside of your control, but other things haven't as well, right? And so that's where I think, again, entrepreneurship is so humbling. And I think people need to also remember to not take it so personally, because as much as you try, as much as you do the right things, like you're saying, even as a doctor, there are still things that it just might not be the right timing, right?
Absolutely. And I think, again, just as a doctor, we never think about things in this country, in the UK, we never think about things commercially. And so one of the things that's really hard is the incentive structure. Because one of the really difficult things for me, especially in certain unnamed countries, is that patient outcomes aren't always the bottom line. Healthcare cost insurers is a massive issue. And so reframing the problem sometimes is a bit of a wrench. But it's not always about we can do this to survivals. It's about, well, we can do exactly what we're doing now, but at a much lower cost for many more people. And that's been a bit of an unlock as well, to be honest.
Padman, my traditional closing question on the show.
I know what's coming next. Here we go.
Locked and loaded. This is called strategy and tragedy, because often the best lessons come from the biggest mistakes. What's one tragedy that's taught you an unforgettable lesson?
It's a great question. if I'm honest, you asked me earlier about whether there was a personal story as to why I got into cancer specifically. And it's not something that got me into cancer, but it is something that got me into medicine. And when I think back to it, is that my mum was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease when I was 3.
Wow.
So she's had it for nigh on 40 years now. And I really wanted to be part of the system that could help her specifically. And my mum is, a really active person. She was an athlete. Her life is outside, gardening, running, jumping, being sociable, whatever.
Amazing.
And it was also a disease that affected her brain, and she's a psychiatrist, which is really, really tough. And I think for me, the tragedy is that over the last, 40 years, 35 years maybe of my life, I've tried loads of things to kind of help her. And part of that has shaped why I work in where I am. I used to see that one day she'd eat certain foods and she'd be a lot better. I remember one day she had a knee injury. She'd had a fall somewhere when she was only about 45. My dad gave her some ibuprofen, and her Parkinson's symptoms got incredibly much better for that week. And I was like, what was going on here? So that has shaped a lot of my interests in medicine. But fundamentally, it has been treating her through, or helping to treat her and optimize her through the tools that are available in the system, i.e. drugs that treat Parkinson's disease prescribed by neurologists. And that has kept her alive for 40 years. She's 80 now. And I think the tragedy for me, and one of the reasons, you asked the question about why entrepreneurship, why Oneday, etc., was that I realized probably 7 or 8 years ago that we'd done a really good job of keeping her alive, but not really keeping her alive. And there is a difference between living and quality of life.
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons that I realized that we kind of owed this to people like her. Treatment within a system, especially the healthcare system as it is now, doesn't always afford the quality and depth of life to people suffering from chronic disease.
Padman, thank you. Thank you for coming on this show and for doing what you're doing. Again, I mentioned in the intro around problems to solve in entrepreneurship. And, what I actually share with my founder students on Oneday is don't sort of, we call it a problem or a pain point, but, it could be, how can I get a healthier snack more quickly? It's kind of it's not always what we would think necessarily as a problem to solve, but what you are doing here really, again, is one of the world's very few, very pressing, urgent life or death problems that need solving. So again, kudos to you, Padman, Ben, your team. I'm so impressed. I'm so glad that you guys are doing what you're doing. So well done and more power to you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for having us. Thank you for curating Oneday and doing all that you do. I genuinely would not be here without that.
Yeah, how crazy.
We're very grateful.
Well done you. Amazing.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening as well. I really hope that you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, please hit that follow, subscribe, like button wherever you're listening to this. It really, really helps us out. And it means that I can bring more incredible guests on the show for you to hear from. Thank you. Episodes are weekly, so hopefully see you next time. Take care. Bye.